Yo, what up? We back with you, Sky Live. Lucas is taking the night off, but we have a very special guest in the place this evening. Good friend of the podcast. You've heard him already before on many episodes breaking down fantasy football, but we're going to get a little more in depth with his brand, personality, and what drives him in fantasy football. Chris Benevides of the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast. My brother, how you feeling this evening?
What's up, dude? It's good over here, over in Massachusetts.
Yeah, cross country once again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Late on my end. What is it, like 9:45 over here? So yeah, dude, we're still rock and rolling though. Gotta get the hustle.
Yeah, I always appreciate it. I feel like, so many people in the fantasy landscape are on the East Coast or at least the Midwest, and I'm just West Coast. So, by the time I get home and I get settled and we do these things, I always feel like it's so late. So I always appreciate you guys.
No problem.
Thank you, man. Well, yo, let's jump into this, man. This is kind of a special series that we're going to be doing. TCK Potters will remember episode 100. If you dial it back, I interviewed a good friend of the podcast, good friend of Lucas's and mine, and inspiration to us in the scene, Nick Ercolano of BDGE, Big Dogs Gotta Eat Fantasy Football. He was the 100th episode guest. And kind of sparked a series. He's got a great series like this with bigger names in the industry that I highly recommend all the listeners of both of our podcasts check out. But we're kind of doing our own version, and this is not to copy Nick at all. This is more just I've liked to interview forever with the music background of things, and I like to get more in depth than just the players and the stats that we break down. So let's dive right into it, man. I just some Q&A, and let's have some fun and get to know you a little bit and your brand. Tell me real quick, right off the bat, man, how did the Commish name come about, and tell me how the team came together. And I believe you're family oriented, right? Like, tell me kind of the dynamic of the entire Commish Fantasy Football Podcast.
Yeah, sure. So the Commish crew effectively is myself, obviously, one of the co-hosts, my brother Alex, and my cousin Eric. So the three of us are normally the regulars on any of the episodes that we feature, and then at any given time, we'll have people from our league that will be on the episodes. And this is really our first season, kicking it off. The Commish brand name, let's say, it kind of really sparked itself. Probably it was just like one sort of summer day we thought we wanted to do a podcast, and we're just kicking around names, and so I am the Commish of our home league, and we kind of just throwing around some names. We're like, why don't we just call it the Commish? Very something simple that people can kind of relate to, and everybody knows who the Commish is inside their league. And we just felt that the way we wanted the league structure to be was going to be sort of one that talked and broached topics around not just fantasy football, but kind of the banter between you and your friends and guys in the league. And that's kind of what we wanted to highlight. And anytime, it just so happened that every time, and we'll get into this, every time we would have a meeting in our league, right, the Commish always tends to get smoked by everybody, right? And so we're always the ones that are sort of handling the bullshit with our friends or whatever. So we thought we would try to make a podcast around that type of environment. And so, so the Commish name kind of just stuck, and that's what we decided to roll with. But the logo is a little bit different. The logo came way back in, I want to say I created it in 2012. Wow. I originally wanted to do a blog, like most, I think, people thought to do before podcasting kind of blew up. And I had a designer work on a concept of a brand idea that I had, and it's the logo that's on the hat. So, dude, thanks for repping it.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. And so, I basically had that logo built for, it was potentially the worst name of any blog idea ever. So I'll just, just terrible. So I'll just go for it. It was called the fantasyschwam.com. That was the name of the blog we wanted to create. It was pretty horrendous. And then, so what happened was I started to write our first blog, and I was like, man, this kind of sucks. Like, I actually don't like writing all that much. So I was kind of just like, fuck this. Like, you know what? This isn't what I actually enjoyed doing. And I'm kind of happy I didn't get down like a rat hole of doing something I didn't enjoy. Like, although I liked fantasy football, I didn't enjoy writing about it that much. So we kind of just stopped, and I parked that whole idea for however long it was, like 5-6 years. And it wasn't until we had the idea for the podcast that I was like, well, I always felt that this logo could be used for something. I just wasn't sure exactly what it was. And then when the idea came around that, maybe we'll just talk about the banter of our actual home league and see if that does anything, or, if people are interested in that kind of stuff, maybe we could use that logo. And, that's what happened. It just turned into the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast. And now we're looking to build out the Commish brand with the Commish crew and, start to build a bit of a reputation in the market.
That's awesome. How's the dynamic of you and Alex and cousins and other family and everything running the episodes? Like, my buddy Daniel and I, who kind of OG TCK Potters will remember, he'll be on some other episodes this year and stuff. He and I started the podcast. We brought on our buddy Curly. They kind of faded out. We brought on Lucas. You've joined many times.
Yeah.
But I've also done we're at 175 or so. Actually, this is 174 podcast. I've done probably 100 of those at least solo. Tell me about the dynamic of working with co-hosts who happen to be family for you, versus doing podcasts solo, preparation, recording, talking for an hour by yourself versus banter back and forth. Do you have a preference for one style or the other? And does that change depending on what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I'll kind of reverse engineer this question a little bit. So I've only done one solo episode, and it was the last episode we did, and it was the Super Bowl 54 review. So nothing really to do with fantasy football. But I thought it was a good way to do a couple of things for me personally. I wanted to learn how to do a solo episode. And so I thought it was kind of a safe way to just recap a thing that people cared about, which is the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And it allowed me to sort of creatively design the podcast episode the way I would like to receive information, in sort of the auditory form that podcasting provides, right? So that's the way I structured the solo episode. Now, the cool part about that is that I get to do that all on my own because I am the one actually in charge of the solo episode. Now, with a team of people, and this, right? It takes a little bit of logistical planning that can become kind of tricky with people that have different schedules. Sure. And so that's why, it makes sense that you have so many episodes on your own, because when you get home from work or whatever your day-to-day job is or whatever you're doing, you can kind of just sit down and do the thing that you plan to do for that episode when you want to, as opposed to waiting around for people to actually get their schedules cleared. So that was a tricky part in the positioning or logistics of scheduling podcast episodes with people. But that being said, the dynamic of the Commish crew, so me, Eric, and Alex, because we're all family, me and Alex actually have 8 years apart. So him and I didn't really start getting close probably until he was like midway through high school. But once he got midway through high school, him and I have been basically best friends. And Eric also, is part of sort of our best friend course. So although we're family, I mean, we're really close. And so in Massachusetts, I think maybe it's like a New England thing, but maybe you can speak to this a little bit on the West Coast. We're super competitive. Like we're like,
of course.
And very like chippy too, like not like clean shit. Like we're very like chippy with each other. Like we throw blows at each other. Like it's not clean fun, man. Like, we can get under each other's skin pretty quickly. And the interesting part is that, and this is the dynamic of people that you sort of care about. You kind of know their triggers, like the thing that's going to piss them off, right? And you got to be careful with how you push their buttons, because you could push them too far, right? And on every episode that we have, there's always that dynamic of what can I possibly say to push them close enough to getting pissed, but not actually far enough to like quitting the episode live, like while we're doing it. And so the point is that the dynamic is fun. We keep each other on our toes. We also keep each other humble, right? So we never let each other get too, our egos too big, although Eric probably has the biggest ego of all of us. And he wouldn't admit it, but if you go listen to the episodes, this is absolutely the biggest ego. But what we try to do is we try to take you through the journey of what a fantasy football season looks like, according to our vantage point. And so that was really the point of season one. And I think the dynamic grows, it changes. There's a lot of fluidity to it, and I think season one taught us a lot of things about each other and how we want to create this type of show. But I think we're starting to get our hands around something that works in the market. So it's fun. Yeah, it's been good.
That's great. And I think it's really entertaining, listening to your podcast, because, I think that like the content holds up, and I think you guys have quality content, but I think it's entertaining in that because you're family, because you're so close and brothers and cousins or whatever, you have a little extra niche, that like other people have, like you said, you know what drives each other and ticks each other and stuff. And I think you can push those buttons, and you generally have somebody blow up on the episode getting fired up and shit, which
Sure.
you don't hear a lot of other podcasts, because like Lucas and I think we're really dialed with chemistry at this point. We feed off each other. I think the content's there and everything, but again, we're not super duper close, personally. So we don't have kind of that fire that comes out naturally for you guys. Right. So I think that's fun. And Daniel and I and Curly had it back in the day, because we were, we grew up together playing Little League and shit back home. And so we've had that 20 years, 25 years of friendship that just, bursts itself. So that's awesome. And you said, you've only done one episode solo, which I think is surprising. You guys are up in 30 plus, right? 40 episodes or so?
Yeah, we're I think we're low 40s. I think the Super Bowl 54 review was episode 45.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah, no, it is. It's you know what it really came down to? We wanted to keep. It was kind of a collective decision that we didn't want anybody to do any solo episodes, because the chemistry of the podcast itself, we were still trying to create that brand. So if we started to pair off from what the design was too quickly, then I think we would have lost a bit of that vision, right?
I totally agree.
And just for transparency, I actually asked the guys ahead of time, hey, do you think it'd be cool if I could do my own solo episode? And Eric was okay with it. I think it took him a little convincing. Alex is kind of laissez-faire with a lot of things, so he's kind of go with the flow most of the time. But I think Eric understood what we were trying to get at, and really, as we grow, it's going to take us some time in understanding that we might have to separate on certain things, because he's already getting people asking him to do more collab episodes. So I'm like, dude, if you want to be the Commish crew sort of representative, go for it. Like, we can travel faster in that sort of way, and post content or repurpose it, similar to how we did this whole year, Sky, between you and I.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I thought it was quite impressive, actually, that all of you have been able to do so many of those episodes outside of that one together, because you're right. It's tough to make sure the timing's lined up and everything else. That being said, we've had you on the TCK pod quite a bit. It's kind of weird to even call you a guest at this point, just because you've been on so many, and I feel like we mesh really well on things. Of course, this episode is a different dynamic, but having you come on to feature something else and give a different voice from Lucas and I, and we're just so appreciative of that. And it's nice, as the usual host of this podcast constantly, it is nice to have a new opinion, a new voice for you all. Do you plan on having other co-hosts on your podcast that aren't the regular guys, and if so, who are a few people in the scene, either way up the ladder, or not, maybe on our level, who are jump starting their own brands and getting things kicked off, who are maybe some folks in the scene that you'd like to have on?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. Eric is actually working pretty heavily on the back end with Twitter right now, and he said he's got a lineup of like 10 people who've reached out to us. Now, awesome. I don't know what the list looks like just yet, but we're going to talk about that over the next few weeks. And again, I don't even know what types of content will be like what will evolve from those types of collaborations, but as long as it's good quality content, I'm all for posting it, and I think that's important. I know that you and I have spoke about some episodes. See, one of the things that I would like to do at a certain point with some of the content quality, and I think we might get into this in more detail a little bit later, so maybe we'll just do it now. So the basis of the Commish podcast, right? It's got this layer of fantasy football. And then what we wanted to do is make it more real, right? And so when you're with your boys and you're just talking just normal banter and just bullshit, you don't just talk about fantasy football, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about everything from, politics or just, anything really that's relevant to today. And that's what we tried to make the Commish podcast about. We didn't want to just level it just with fantasy football, because otherwise the content can just get week to week, and you can find other places to find that type of content, right? And so it gives us a different voice, it gives us a different angle, but it also doesn't box us into a particular set of content prescriptions, let's say, right? We can actually maneuver and dive in and out of different topics that seemingly would be important to us that people who follow fantasy football might find interesting, even though it doesn't have anything to do with fantasy football. So, for example, I know that I had reached out to you, and this is actually something I would still like to do with you, Sky. So, we're kind of just talking about this in real time, but, I know that you voiced kind of on the peripheral or just in your purview about like Colin Kaepernick and just basically how he was treated.
Sure.
And I think I would love to jump into a conversation with you about that. I wonder if I have a different opinion or could offer maybe a perspective and listen to you and ask you questions about things that maybe I wouldn't know about from your perspective, being on the West Coast, being someone who watched Colin Kaepernick as a quarterback. And so, maybe, and my bet would be that people in the fantasy football community would love to hear a back and forth between you and I over a topic that is still kind of fresh to a lot of people. I mean, we're coming up to the 2020 season. He had his workout in 2019. Maybe he gets picked up, maybe he doesn't. And, he's got a memoir coming out. And so, there's a lot of interesting topics that I think people would be interested in hearing that are borderline controversial, but that's okay. What I would like to create on top of what we've already built on season 1 for the Commish is a place where people can have conversations about important topics, but it doesn't have to become hateful or malevolent or malicious.
100%,
right? Let's save that for the nonsense banter over fantasy. Like that's where we can dive into each other and have some fun and pull each other a little bit. Like that's cool. But what I also would like to do is actually talk about maybe some real shit that people might actually find interesting and make it a space where we can actually expand the knowledge of one another as opposed to just ripping each other apart. So those are some of the things that I would like to create in maybe season 2 and season 3, and just see where it takes us. Maybe people like it, maybe people don't, who knows? But I think that would be an interesting angle to explore.
I think it's fantastic. And we could talk about this off the pod, just as far as locking things up, but that I'm down. And
yeah, absolutely.
I've mentioned a couple of times on the podcast about my previous life, being a nationally touring reggae artist, traveling the country, playing music with my best friends, for 10 years, and traveling this entire nation, meeting a lot of different people, eating different food, hearing different, languages in general, but also different, dialects, of the American English language and things. And it's just different. I mean, you hear a lot of times like East Coast versus West Coast, like it's just different. The South versus the Northwest, the Midwest, Hawaii, Alaska, whatever.
Right.
So I think without getting too deep into that topic right now, I think it would be super interesting to have those conversations about kind of our own version, maybe of like E60 or 30 for 30 or behind, like, you know what I'm saying? Just,
totally
but like maybe relative to fantasy football, but just, different, because if you take politics aside, and you just took Colin Kaepernick, ability wise, when he was in his prime, and his ability to be a runner and a thrower and all these other things, he's in the conversation with other quarterbacks right now that we're talking about as very, very viable fantasy football quarterbacks, right? So I think that's an interesting thing, and I really appreciate that. And I guess what that leads into my next question, which is, you're starting a new brand. Season 1 just ended for you all. You're just starting a new brand. Obviously, you're passionate about what you're doing and other things, other ideas that you have. What about fantasy football specifically sparks a fire in you enough to put in all this time, all this research, all these hours with the microphone and the camera and the studying and social media? I mean, anybody that does what we do with any consistency, on no matter what level you are, how big your accounts are, how many followers, none of that shit. If you do any of this, you realize and respect how much time and energy it takes to do what we do. Not that anybody's better than anybody else. We're all just on the same hustle. What for you drives it far enough to put in these extra hours?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was sort of a confluence of a couple of things. And I'll kind of go back into like when fantasy football started for me. So the home league that we're in started like 25, 26 years ago. So I actually wasn't in it. I was a kid. This league was, started between my dad, my uncle, and my other uncle. So two uncles and my father. And I'm talking so far back when like Emmitt Smith was getting drafted, right? I'm talking Dante Culpepper and Troy Aikman were getting drafted. Steve Young were getting, those guys were getting drafted. And fantasy, and what they used to do was they used to take the stat lines, the box scores from the USA Today, and crunch the numbers in a very, very primitive Excel sheet that was like just fresh out of Microsoft, right? And so I used to help my dad crunch those numbers. I used to punch in the numbers like individually, and you'd have to go through all the lists, and then we have to print out all of the information for the weekly meetings that they would have. And so to kind of give people a bit of insight to our league, we have weekly meetings every Wednesday. It's part of our bidding structure so that we don't have a waiver wire. You actually have to bid live money on people to get them on your team. And so that's basically how it works. And it's been that way for 26 years. And so I grew up with that system, and then Yahoo came out with their platform. And before you knew it, it was automated scoring. And before people had cell phones, we didn't have to worry so much about punching in the numbers on fantasy football, but we did still have to print out all of these stat lines. So, we'd be wasting hundreds of pieces of paper. It's like, yeah, it's very, very bad. Like very, like no one cared about the environment back in the
very
90s.
90s, just, yeah.
Yeah, add that to the list of very 90s, just like wasting paper, absolutely wasting paper. And so that's what used to happen. And so, then, obviously cell phones come out and you have applications. So, we got rid of paper, which is great. But fast forward is that, I basically grew up with fantasy football as a kid. And then I joined the league, and it's always been every fall, just a really huge passion of ours. That just, there was a lot of bonding and a lot of excitement between, friends and family and stuff. And it was just fun to be around, that group of guys during that time. So that's how the fantasy football sort of passion arose. Now, the podcasting part of it basically came because, I fell in love with podcasting, right? So in my mid-20s, and I think, and I don't want to sort of single out, men or women. I think everyone kind of goes through their own journey at any given time. But, I learned to cultivate a good group of sort of like, let's say good male role models in my life, right? And I have a lot of strong male role model connections. I think for men, it's really healthy to have those connections. Yeah. I really think it is, right? And in my, let's say, mid to early 20s, I kind of hit a bit of a mental rut, right? Like I was really kind of lost. I wasn't really sure as to what direction my life was going to go. And it was pretty shitty. It was a tough time. And then I found podcasting, and I realized this whole other world of people that knew way much more than I did. And so I kind of fell in love with a lot of those sort of self-help podcasts, that sort of mental prep, that confidence building type stuff. And I was like, oh man, like, this is really cool. Then what ended up happening is that I realized that some of these people interviewed other people that were in business. Now you might already know where I'm going with this, but I heard a podcast with this guy, Lewis Howes, and he interviewed this other guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. And I was like, who is this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk? And so I started diving into that rabbit hole, and I was like, whoa, what is this stuff? And so before I knew it, man, I was freaking hooked. I was hooked because it was all good message. It was all great content. It was things that I needed at the time, and I just fell in love with the delivery of it. So between YouTube and podcasting, it was great. So to fast forward a bunch of years, I've always kept the podcasting thing in my back pocket. I have a long commute to work. I live in Fall River, but I work in Boston, which is about an hour and a half or so commute. And so podcasting comes in handy. Now, one of the things that I always wanted to do was start a podcast. But I wanted to do it on a topic that wouldn't get me into too much trouble. Okay. So I didn't want to like, I have a lot of friends, and not that I'm afraid to be, I'm not trying to avoid conflict in a sense, but I respect a lot of people that are in my life, and I don't want to piss anybody off just so carelessly. So what I wanted to do was start something where I had passion for, that I could have my own voice, and I could speak on a topic relatively intelligently with some authority that wouldn't piss off a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And fantasy football just happened to be that that slot for me. And that's the route that I took. And now what's cool is that, you know, since we're starting to build something, it's like, okay, now I'm going to start testing the limits on, you know, kind of going back to what we just spoke about, expanding the conversation to make it a more, to make it, let's say, a vessel of goodness. Let's say, like even on controversial topics, I think we've lost the art of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to see if we can turn that into something useful, and maybe use the platform of fantasy football to do it. Which is, I know it's like it's kind of an interesting vision, but you know, I'm wondering if it can happen. So,
Well, I mean, it's a lot to unpack right there. And honestly, man, that
yeah.
is, you know, you and I have done a lot of fantasy football podcasts together, but we just met this year through TCK Pod, which we'll get to later in the episode and all that. But we haven't really had these conversations yet personally, which
Sure.
is my shit, dude.
Yeah.
First of all,
great. Yeah.
First of all, the School of Greatness with Lewis Howes is a big deal for me and my
Cool.
partner as well.
Yeah.
Gary V's the boss. I mean, anybody that listens to the podcast knows what's up. I'm going to ask you a question / favor involving him here in a second. But, you know, again, diving back to having Nick on episode 100, we brought on Gary V. We talked about Gary for about 20-30 minutes on the podcast because Gary's been an influence on Nick as well. For people that don't know Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a entrepreneur. You know, he's kind of a multimedia guru, if you will, but he's also just he's a regular guy, and he's just the dude where if you walk by it in the store, you wouldn't fucking know who he is, but he harnesses this power. He's very intelligent, and he's very real, which I think is, he's making realness and wearing your shit cool, you know, which I think we delve down so heavy. So I guess I applaud you for bringing this up in general in life, but also like the fantasy football circle, I think is cool. Again, you're a new brand. And what Nick and I talked about a lot with BDGE kind of being TCK Pod and the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast 5 years ago, figuring it out, trying to get a homie, like, you know, hey, follow for follow, all this shit.
Yep.
And now, they're fucking crushing it. I mean, they're doing a really great job in the scene, and we're on our way too. We're just behind them. But you have to have something that sets you apart, right? And to my knowledge, nobody is doing those things. Nobody is doing the talk about controversial topics and have a conversation versus just banter for 5 seconds, reading the report and like, is Kareem Hunt going to be valuable or not because he's a dick? It's way more than that. It's way more than that. And so I think that some of these things are appropriate, and I think would be great content. I'd certainly be listening to with heavier messaging maybe around the space and what it means to people. And I think the NFL in general, I think sports maybe in general at this point, but NFL for sure, if there was not fantasy football, I've been a diehard football fan my entire life, bro. I was 7 years old when the Niners won the Super Bowl in 1994. Was the first one I remember. Changed my life forever. I played football for 15 years, do this shit, whatever. If we didn't have fantasy football, I'm not sure I would bat more than an hour on a Sunday because I got other shit to do. But I watch every single game like everybody else does. You know, we're watching the Bills and the Dolphins in week 5 on Thursday Night Football because it matters. And and so I think if we put some of these other topics into real life conversations, I think it would also be important. Colin Kaepernick being one, of course, but many other things. Mike Vick, Ray Rice, you know, Kareem Hunt, many. Drug busts, you know, Josh Gordon. I mean, there's a million things we could talk about all day, which I appreciate. So that being said, like, so you have a homie that works with or works for Gary Vaynerchuk. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my best friend Blake, he actually got hired a little under a year ago. He works for VaynerMedia in New York City. So I'm pretty sure his desk is like in the purview of Gary V's office. If anybody knows the Ask Gary V, he has it right in his office. It's pretty dope. But yeah, dude, dude, he tells me a bunch of stories that are really fucking cool. I mean, it's as cool as it seems, man. I guess so. He does like these if you follow him, he does these like brand co-ops with like pretty high level people. So like, for example, A-Rod is like one of his clients, I think. My buddy was telling me like 2 weeks ago that Tony Gonzalez was using their conference room to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson, like the astrophysicist. It's like, what does Tony Gonzalez have to do with Neil deGrasse Tyson in an interview? I haven't found that. I don't know where the content is, but I need to find it. Like, it's got to be somewhere. The point being is that, Gary V is just, he's Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's doing his thing, and my buddy has the opportunity. He works in the digital media team, and is killing it right now. They're just, it's awesome. It's really cool to know kind of how the inner workings are as real as they kind of come across on Gary V's YouTube channel. So.
And Gary is a diehard Jets fan.
Yeah.
He was actually born in the Soviet Union. His family came in and he grew up in New Jersey. He became a Jets fan, and he's a diehard. He's super fucking passionate about it, which is amazing. Yep. So I think the move is to have Blake on. I think so. Have Blake get D-Rock the footage, and then D-Rock passes to Gary. Then Gary hits up. Okay, Gary hits us up, flies me out to New York. All right, I'm just trying to figure out exactly.
Boom, we blow up. Done. See you later.
We have lunch with Tony Gonzalez and A-Rod and every new rapper that Gary's behind, and make it happen. All right, Irie. Cool, man. I love me some Gary V, but we should probably move on. Sure. So let's dive back to your podcast really quick. So Gary is super incredible resource for anybody looking to get into the scene, build a business, get into the entrepreneurial lifestyle. If you're in your early 20s and you just graduated college and you have no fucking clue what you're going to do, or you're going to go to college because you're supposed to, but you don't know what you're doing, listen to some Gary V shit before you dive into the rest of your life. I'm 34 now, or 33 now, and I wish I had a way better perspective 15 years ago before I dove into things. And I think a lot of people our age feel that way. So look ahead a little bit. That being said, again, you're starting the new brand. In the first year, what do you think went well for you? What can you guys improve on? What are some immediate changes that you'll be implementing in 2020? And then overall, just some goals and objectives for the Commish FFP in 2024 season 2.
Yeah. So I think look, I don't know if it's just we set our expectations so low. I was happy enough just to get through a full season intact, right? That we were I was very happy that we put together a full string of episodes every week, or, a few episodes a week, that more or less accomplished the type of podcast I think we wanted to create, which was a journey through a fantasy football season following, a home league of a bunch of guys that are heavy characters, big personalities. And then also being able to join you on the TCK pod league, which is great. And then featuring that as well, kind of tethering the two together, and us talking through what that was from our perspective, right? So guys in the league could get the, Sky's perspective, and then also go to the Commish podcast and get our perspective on the league that they were in. So
I love that.
So that was pretty cool. Maybe it was a bit of, we set the bar maybe a little low, or maybe it was just that I'm very much of put out content and see what happens as well. I didn't want to set too many expectations too high, just because I wanted to see if we could actually create something without shifting it too heavily too quickly. I didn't want to feel so boxed in whether or not things went well or didn't go well. So that was something I felt we did fairly well. I think we stuck to the plan, which was good. Things that didn't go well. I think we ran out of time. In the fantasy football season, it's like, and we even talked about this, it's like you go from week 1 to week 13 like this. It's like it just happens so quick, and I'm like, where the hell did those 12 weeks go? It's like, I wanted to do more sort of prep work in the end, sort of the analysis before the season started, and we didn't really get to push out as much content as we would have liked to. There were definitely weeks that we missed because of scheduling. There were a lot of it really revolved around content producing. I think was probably our biggest place where we could probably improve for 2020. But other than that, again, I think I was overall happy with the type of work that we put together. And then it was the last question was something along the lines of what are we sort of revamping for 2020, or
what are some of the more realistic maybe now goals, and then pie in the sky goals or objectives to take Commish FFP to the next level. You had year one. You're kind of just we did the same shit 2 years ago, 3 seasons ago. You're just fucking throwing lines in the ocean and hoping you get a bite every once in a while. Figure out how to run a bunch of Instagram shit. Figure out how the podcast works. Figure out who on your team knows what, right?
Yeah.
Because you kind of realize that certain guys are better at other things. Some people like the podcast. Some people like the video. Some people like the social media. Some are better at digging up information. You got to kind of feel yourselves out coming into the second year, we made a huge growth last year, brought on Lucas, of course, had you coming in. We just had a different mindset, and 2020 for us is just going to be another step, right? And likewise for you. So what are some things that you either have implemented already that, we can look forward to, or things that maybe you're still kind of in the building stages for to figure out, but kind of pie in the sky things that you'd like to make happen to let y'all build this year?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So a few things that we've already done or are in the works right now. So we do want to polish up a bit of the brand. And we'll get back to that in a second, because I think the apparel side of what we want to do might actually be even bigger than just the podcast itself. So I'll touch on that in just a second.
Are you saying I'm going to need a new hat?
Dude, I'm expecting a shipment tomorrow.
Like, is this one's expired already? What's up, Doc?
So yeah.
It's all right. I don't want to cut you off. I'm just curious.
All right, we'll get into that. But yeah, no. So we the apparel side of the fantasy football brand, I think there's an open lane there. And I'll touch on that in a second, because I think this is important. But from the brand perspective, a lot of it was best effort, right? Like you just said, like it was just a lot of best effort work. A lot of the Instagram posts that we put together were really just kind of on the fly. All of the visuals were very much on the fly. The way we even posted the episodes, right? I mean, I just sort of threw those things together on a PowerPoint, captured and pasted in it, and published it on Instagram. So it was very much like best effort as best as we could. But I am working with a designer to make that more visually appealing and polish that sort of section of it up. And I think that'll go a long way for a number of reasons. The first, obviously, is that the content gets delivered better. People find you to be I say more authentic in some case, but it's also like, just for myself, like I would feel better if it looked better. So sure. It kind of just adds a little bit of that for our own case. From the content side, we just talked a little bit about some of the things that I'd like to sort of explore. But then, again, I think one of our best episodes actually was episode, I think it was 15. I think the title of the episode is called "An Antonio Brown Trade Goes Sideways." And what I did is I talked about a situation of a friend of mine who was a commish, and they had an Antonio Brown problem, like everybody probably had, and how it basically fucked up his trade, right? Antonio Brown fucked up his trade, and his buddy wanted to renege on a trade that they had already made. And so we basically he wanted to get our perspective, and so he told me the whole story, and I presented that on the episode. Now, my goal for 2020 would be to put in some kind of capacity where people can tell us their league problems, and we'll be a voice for them. Like, we'll be the judge, jury, and executioner on our episodes to maybe settle debates that people have in their own leagues. So I would like to do something like that. Now, I've heard podcasts where people can actually call in and leave a voicemail about that particular issue, and then the people talk about it, or we can just read it. But some combination of leaving a voicemail, we're going to have a website up, I think, in a couple of months, or, write into us, DM us, where we'll actually go ahead and really kind of just hash out that problem that you guys have had in your league, and you can just take it from there. Your league can just take it from there however you want to. So yeah, so I think episode 15 was probably I think it's episode 15. Is it episode 15 or 18? But it's about Antonio Brown. I think that was a good marker for us to know that type of stuff works and people like it.
I love that. That's cool. And again, something unique. Yep. Everybody breaks down the weekend recap. Everybody does a waiver episode. Everybody does blah, blah. You got to do something different, right? Or you're just not going to stick. I mean, you might just have longevity if you keep going, but you got to do something unique. I think that's totally cool. I remember that episode. There was another one, I think, where I think Philip Lindsay was involved with another one of those. And again, it got you guys fired up talking on the podcast, but it also got like us thinking as listeners, like, whoa, I deal with that shit all the time. It would be great if I could phone that in and let people know. And, we'll talk about how you and I connected in just a little bit, which kind of is in this conversation. But, we've always been very open to people reaching out to us via email, DMs. I mean, Gary, again, talks about all the time, the only him time he gets is when he's on a plane without Wi-Fi. And he's like, it's the best couple of hours I get in a week because I can't do anything. Otherwise, the dude's in like a car going from one thing to the other, another meeting, and he's just rocking DMs all day. I mean, he's a dude with like, what is it, 4 million, something like that, followers or whatever. And he's answering like all the DMs. I mean, it's stupid.
Yes.
Anyway, it's something like, obviously you and I are dealing with, fractions of that, but
Sure.
it's still the point of we're real people, man. I want to have
Yeah.
those conversations. I want to
Yep.
answer questions best I can. Am I going to be
Mhm.
right all the time? Absolutely not. But I spend a lot more time on this shit than most people do that I know. So I might have a little more insight to let you make a better decision, at least
Sure.
more informed. And obviously you're doing the same thing.
Yep.
And and you talked about the branding and the marketing and getting new merch and all this shit. Again, that's something that not many people on our level are doing yet. I've wanted to do
Yeah.
that with the TCK pod. Again, with the band, I've got merch connections. We've had shirts and CDs and stickers and hoodies and shit for 12 years. I've just haven't done it yet with TCK pod, and I'm late
Sure.
to the game. But you guys have a great brand, and you have, I think, a steamroll on that. You're also in the marketing field professionally, correct?
Yeah.
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 So what attributes of marketing in general in your marketing background do you put toward fantasy football specifically, and building the Commish brand overall? So we talked about the merch, but what about branding specifically, or marketing, I should say, in your professional world, do you actually take into the fantasy realm?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that um, I think there's a few things that are innate. I think that I kind of just fell into a good thing that I like to do. But also a lot of things that I had to work on throughout sort of my professional career. Okay, so what I mean by that is, um, one of the things that I like and I learned to like, I think my professional career is a basic need of uncertainty. Now I say that specifically because, again, this is going to kind of go back to that sort of self help type stuff, but it's important because I think if everybody understands their level of, let's say, risk, it'll help you sort of manage your own route in life in some sense. So I'll kind of just give you my story here. And really what I learned is that, there's the six basic human needs. And one of those, you have certainty, uncertainty, growth mindset, to name a few. Uncertainty are things like, like surprises. People like surprises, but what you don't want are accidents. Like that's a piece of uncertainty that you don't like. Now I say that because I've always enjoyed working in startup environments. I've done that basically for my entire, let's say, professional career. I've always worked in companies that were between 2 and 25 people tops.
Mm.
And the current company I work in maybe has about 5. And so I've learned to understand how to navigate ambiguity and learned how to navigate uncertainty. And there's a bit of fun in that if you look at it the right way. Now, some people don't like that. Some people are much more risk adverse and they don't like that type of environment. They like more structure, more security, and a very sort of consistent understanding that they're going to get a paycheck every week. And of course, I like that to some extent as well. But I think the uncertainty of working at a startup helps you learn that there are things that are fun about not knowing what's going to happen day to day or week to week, and that you need to sort of plan as best as you can to fight those. But it also tempers your expectations, because if things don't go according to plan, instead of getting upset, you actually know how to handle those problems. So now, when it comes to fantasy football, it's like, again, it's like I didn't want to set too many expectations up front for the brand because I wanted it to breathe and kind of morph in its own sort of skin, let's say. But then navigating it on, let's say, even the apparel side, like for example, the hat that you're wearing, right? That took a little bit of time to figure out what vendor to use. I mean, just trying to find a good vendor, it takes time. And that's, that getting it right, I think is kind of a testament to a bit of my marketing background in that, I know what good quality looks like, and I know the type of brand that I want to put together that I think people will enjoy in the market. And I think that that's a lane that is right now kind of open, right? There's a bit of a fantasy football apparel lane that no one is really touching. And I think that there could be a space for a couple of brands to really kind of pop out that people will feel good about, and it'll represent not just fantasy football, but the things that I think we're trying to create on the podcast. And it'll in itself, the brand will carry its own weight and move the industry in a way that maybe it hasn't yet in the past. And so that's what we're trying to build. And I think working in marketing and in a bit of sales, I've understood, and just on, just to kind of maybe give a bit more information, like I understand how to work Google Analytics and Google AdWords and ad roll and retargeting and marketing. And how to create content and newslettering and, email campaigns, etc. So, I have a bit of that background, and I hope to use a lot of that. We haven't yet. I think the first part of it, and again, I'm learning a lot of this on the fly, is that, part of it is just getting the quality and the brand correct. And I think if we do that, the rest of it will sort of take care of itself, because I feel confident that the technical skills that I have will be enough to sort of get us to where we want to be from a selling standpoint, let's say. So I think that that's probably the best answer I can give, is that, I've been able to learn how to work in ambiguity, which is, I think, like you would understand, when you're starting off. And even Nick, actually, on the BDGE episode that you guys had, he even said, like, there's just so much that you don't know what you don't know. And he talked about, I think he talked a bit about his mentor helping him sort of navigate some of that. He had somebody that he looked up to help him. And but he's right, though. I mean, look, when you're starting things by yourself, man, you have to have a little confidence, a little bit of trust in yourself. But man, when you don't know what you don't know, it can be a bit scary. So you need to know how to work within yourself and temper your expectations, such that even if you make a wrong choice, that you are big enough to overcome them. Yep. And that's kind of what I've learned in my profession.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. I'm also in marketing, sales field in my professional life as well. And I still do the music stuff, but behind the scenes. So I manage the band and I do the tour bookings and shit, but I no longer tour for a variety of reasons I don't need to get into. But with Nick specifically, so, I had reached up to Nick, who I've been inspired by for episode 100. Nick had actually reached out to Andy Holloway of the Fantasy Footballers. That was kind of his guy, right? So in his series, and again, I really want people to, first of all, follow BDGE. They're fucking fantastic. A lot of characters are great. Nick is super fucking dialed. The rest of that team over there is excellent. Lucas actually found us through he works for BDGE as well, and he found us through them and everything else. So it's a big family.
Awesome.
But check him out, because he is doing a series like this, and really I'm copying his, if you want to say that, but he's got plenty. He's got, Matt Harmon and the Fantasy Footballers and James Coe and Adam Silva and Evan Silva and all these people. So he's got some bigger names to get into, but almost every single one of them, depending on their field, say the same thing that Chris, you just said, and that I would agree with you. And it's really anything in life that you're shooting into that doesn't really have a manual. You just got to jump in the ocean and see if you can swim. You know, and eventually you're going to tread water and keep moving until you catch your legs, or you're going to sink. And even if you sink, it's okay. You just, failing is not bad. What is bad is failing and not getting back up. So if you're able to get back up and keep rolling, it could be all right. And that being said, what are maybe the people who aren't in the marketing scheme, who haven't thought about merch, who, maybe they just started a podcast, so they're doing a podcast on their phone. They don't have the microphone yet. Like the first year of TCK Pod on the season, if you listen back, the quality is horrendous compared to now, but it used to be like super cool because that's all I had. And it was through my headphones and my phone. That's all that I had. Right. So you just keep building. To somebody who's not in our space with the marketing and whatever, really quickly, what are just maybe a couple pointers for like the easiest and most difficult thing to do in marketing in regards to fantasy football, that could potentially quickly get somebody who's fresh to this getting the ball rolling?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to sound so cliche, but I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what you just said. You just got to do something. You got to do something, whatever that thing is. Like, inaction is absolutely the worst thing to do. And so that's a very, it's easily said than done. I swear to you, it's easily said than done. A lot of people will just do nothing because it's more comforting to sit in a place of complacency. You really don't want to do that. If you really care about something enough that you want to try, you will be better for it. Your character will build, and it'll be worthwhile. Even if it's not something you stick with, just try doing something new. From a marketing standpoint, this is just a general principle that I try to live by in marketing, because it can go one of two ways in marketing, right? And not to piggyback too much off of politics, but marketing can get you into a spot where the marketing is bigger than the product. right? And that's going to let people down. And so marketing has to be very careful with making sure that you're delivering what you say you are delivering. Make sure you're doing that, and make sure you're honest and consistent and authentic about what you're trying to deliver to your audience. It's really, really difficult to gain trust back after you've lost it with people. And people will forgive mistakes if they're honest mistakes, but they won't forgive manipulation and deceit. And a lot of marketing can skew that way. So,
Totally agree.
my advice is just to be authentic with what you're trying to build and do it the way you feel comfortable about. Don't try to lie your way through something. If it's not great, it's okay, man. But just keep working at it. It'll work itself out. And that's really it. I mean, those are probably the two biggest pieces. Do something, get in action, and just be it's like kind of finding your North Star. Just stick to that and fly straight.
I couldn't agree more, man. And I think I would just piggyback on that a little bit as well, and just like be authentic, right? Like be
Yep.
who you are. And I know that that's a very Instagram thing to say, but the reality is, like, you and I do the same things. We're obviously feeling each other out here, but like we work the same professionally. We're both into fantasy football. We're, blah, 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 competitive with our family. Like we have a lot of things in common. But I guarantee you we do those things in common, probably in different ways, right?
Yeah.
So for me, what I see in the fantasy landscape, and of course we're building to, and we don't do anything better than anybody else or anything like that. And honestly, as far as Instagram pages and Twitter followers go, we have very minimal followership, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about it. Like, I'm not worried about it at all. I look at other accounts and they got 1,500, $3,000, whatever. And I'm like, yo, respect, good for you. That's fucking killer. But you have 42 posts. So does that mean that you like bought a bunch of them? Are you doing the follow for follow thing? Are you following 4,000 people and hoping some of those come back just to follow you to get your numbers up? What that means is, and again, look, respect, do whatever you want to do. For me, that's not authentic. I'm not into that. I would rather have 300 followers and have 250 of them really giving a shit about what we're doing than having 5,000 followers and still having 250 of them giving a shit what we're doing.
True.
It doesn't matter to me, right? So for me, it's being authentic and being yourself and being who you are. And I think also sticking true to what you do well. Everybody does something really well, and everybody's not good at something else. So if you're really good at something, like we're building the team on the TCK pod, and we have some people in the background now building the team, writing articles. They're going to be coming on the podcast soon. They're doing analytic graphics and shit. Super dope stuff that I don't want to do. I don't have time to do. I don't know how to do, but it doesn't matter because I do this. I like to do this. This is where my passion's at. That's where their passion's at. At the end of the day, it comes together and it's a thing for the entire brand. And that's what's super important. So, teamwork makes the dream work. I firmly believe that, so.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And so building the brand, who, you're talking about merch and everything else and who you kind of work your style off, who in the industry, no matter how big or small, is maybe inspiring you and how they're building their brand and how they're going about things, whether it be merch, social media followings, podcast, content, draft guide, whatever. Who in the space is inspiring you to kind of lead in that direction as far as marketing and branding goes overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, so fantasy football almost can be broken into like maybe two categories, right? You have like your independent contributors, and let's say the fantasy footballers are kind of at the top of that pillar, and then you have your Yahoos and your ESPNs and all the people that have all the backing and the production behind them. Now, so I've only recently just started to actually follow like in the independent crowd, and I would say I even follow them more heavily on social media than I actually follow their actual podcast or YouTube channels, right? So for example, dude, I listen to you and Lucas more than mostly anybody else. I think if there's a place I'm going to get my content on what's happening in the market, or I should say in football, it's you and Lucas. I mean, I think you guys are, and this is what gravitated me towards your podcast to start, is that you guys produce really good quality content. It's very well organized. You you and Lucas and the guests you have on are probably the best that I've heard out of,
Wow.
and I'm not even just, really not trying to blow,
No, I know. I know.
ego. It's really, I'm trying to be really honest here, because it is like, I really think, you guys have something great here. And I'm very honored to be a part of this process here. But I say that not because like, again, like, because we've done collaborations together, but dude, like I said, I've been listening to podcasts for over 6-7 years now. I've listened to hundreds of podcasts in my life. Like, I know what types of content are good and which ones are not. And I tend to stick to the ones I think are good and which ones are not. And it's just that it's that simple for me. And so, I from a content standpoint, I think you and Lucas, man, you guys have nailed it. I think you guys are doing some great work. The fantasy footballers, from a video content standpoint, have some good things going. Like, they have a very, very good quality production. They're obviously, they're well sponsored. They're making money. They're doing this as a full-time job. So they have much more resources. They have more time to do these types of things. But overall, I mean, they should be looked at as the standard of independent podcasting, right?
I think they are. I don't know anybody that would. I know that would disagree. I mean, I've talked to a couple of people in the space where they're, and I've been listening to Andy, Mike, and Jason since the beginning too, and I love them so much, and I would be honored to have one of them on the podcast and things. And listening to Nick interview each one of them, and Andy a couple of times, you get to hear their backstory too, which is really awesome. But it's super cool because listening to them 5 years ago and now, it's interesting because I hear people who are kind of on the other side who aren't really following them anymore. And it's not that they don't like them, but it's kind of like Matt Berry. I use the example, right?
Yeah.
So Matt Berry, like 10, 12 years ago when I started fantasy football, he and Mike Clay were like the only ones that knew what they were talking about. But ESPN and them and fantasy football got so big so fast.
Yep.
Like, he doesn't have time to be Matt Berry anymore. He is strictly a personality, and I'm not hating at all. But I don't listen to ESPN at all. I use the platform because I just prefer it. But I don't listen to it. I watch it on ESPN when I'm paying attention, but I don't listen to podcasts anymore. I don't read the articles anymore because it seems very watered down. And it's no disrespect. It's just they have so much shit, so much demand, so much content they have to pump out at all times. You just can't go as in depth. And the fantasy footballers, as much as I love them, are like getting their ish. They're building the team. But now Andy, Mike, and Jason, who I think are all very educated and great analysts in their own right, are starting to get to a point where they're almost like beyond capacity. So they're having,
I would agree with you. Yeah.
They have like Jake Seeley this year hosted the DFS podcast, which Mike had been doing solo for years. So now Chris Meany and Jake Seeley and guests do that podcast because, like, it's one more thing for Mike to have to do. So don't do it. And I think you just eventually grow. So I super appreciate the words, man. And I know you're not blowing smoke and bullshit. And it does mean a lot. I take it very seriously, and I appreciate that. I'm with you, though. There are independent podcasts who are on our level who I also listen to more than other ones. BDGE is one of them because Nick was always just super straight shooter. Big facts only is one of his slogans, but it's fucking real, dude. It's like no bullshit, cut right to the facts. I just want to hear it. I don't give a shit if it's 3 hours or 20 minutes. If it's content I want to listen to, I'm going to listen to it. So I appreciate that. And that's awesome.
Yeah, bro. And like, to your point, if it's 20 minutes to 3 hours, like you'll find the time to listen to good content. That's just the way it rolls. So,
and it's a podcast, man. Pause.
Pause, dude. That's what I do. Sometimes, like, dude, I love Joe Rogan. So if I'm listening to a 3-hour Joe Rogan episode with someone I love that he's interviewing, I'm like, all right, I'll drive to work and I'll listen the rest of it on my way home. That's just the way it goes. So I'll do it. I'll find the time for good content. Dude. Yeah. So in the end, I think the fantasy footballers are definitely doing good video production. And that's kind of why I didn't really put them in the content category, but more so from a production and video category. They're great. But what's in this, I think, maybe this is a good sort of spot to dive into sort of some of the apparel stuff, is that I haven't really found many brands that I would want to spend my money on. And that's just kind of, I think, the blue ocean for me right now. I think that's what me, Eric, and Alex are, and we have partners over at the Wire Fantasy Football Podcast with Tyler and Tim that we're partnering. There's some of our boys right here local in Massachusetts, and that they want to start up their own thing as well. And so we decided to maybe do some partnerships. But really on the apparel side, I haven't found anything where I'm like, man, I would probably spend money on that because I like that stuff, whatever that thing is, whether it's the podcast or the brand that the podcast has, I would want to spend money on it, and I haven't found it. And so and this is why, we started coming out with the hats, and we started doing polls on Twitter, and we started getting people's opinions, and, friends and not friends. And, we'd always ask them, like, how much would you spend on a hat, like, in general? And then, if you found a hat like this that we're, right now we're kind of giving away to get the brand out, would you guys spend money on it? And I have friends that won't take it for free now. They want to help support what we're trying to grow. It's like, dude, thank you. And they want to spend money on it. And so it's like, awesome. So, so now it's about getting the quality of the product right. And so, the hat that you're wearing and the hats that we're trying to create, we're going to create some beanies, but we're going to start with some hat apparel. And then we're going to just start to carve out a brand of fantasy football apparel that's high quality, but, again, evenly priced. Like, I think, we don't have to go and spend $35 on a hat. Right. It could be, I think $28, $29 is a good price point. If you're buying a hat, a baseball hat, those are what, $35-$40 now or something like that. It's absurd. So, it doesn't have to be that expensive. I know how much we're paying for them and how much they would cost to ship. And so, I just think it's a lane inside fantasy football where, I think a good quality brand that's producing good quality content, that has good collaborations, that can, continue to produce good content in time, also has a lane where, we can also make some good apparel that is just as good of a quality as the content we're producing. So that's really the goal, I think, over the next few years, is to create that and hopefully grow it.
That's awesome, man. And like I said earlier, and as well as I do, you got to find something that sets you apart. And if you're going to have apparel and swag going along with the podcast and the brand, I mean, that's going to be huge for you. And, I can say that with the band. Our band started out just like college kid band fucking around in our early 20s. And we realized, like, hey, actually, like, people want us to play downtown. So we started playing bar gigs and clubs and all this shit. Well, okay, now bigger bands are coming to town. They're having us open for them. That's opening more doors. Why not travel? Why not tour? Why not this and this? All of a sudden we're going national, and all those shirts and CDs and business cards and shit that we gave away for free, wouldn't take money, just gave people shit. Couple years later, people are like, yo, man, I want 10 CDs. And I'm like, you don't need 10 CDs. They're like, I know, but I want to buy 10 CDs from you, and I want to gift them out to friends of mine that I think would enjoy your music. And it's the same shit. It's like, if you gave me fucking 10 hats, or I bought 10 hats on the West Coast, I'd be out here fucking frisbeeing them around, being like, yo, dude, you're into fantasy football. Check out my boys on the East Coast. Boom. And the beautiful thing about audio and video is you can watch it anywhere in the world. Right? So you don't have to be there. Something that I'm way into, and Nick and I talked to on episode 100, is the live aspect of things. And I won't dive too into it, because I think it's something that is just so in depth, and there's a lot. But I've been a live performer for the last 10, 15 years. I've been booking shows and venues all over the country. I would love to, if we did this on a stage somewhere, I mean, like, it'd be the funnest shit ever. You know what I mean? And we'd have 10, 15, 20 people show up, grab a beer, spend $5. Who gives a shit? And at the end of it, we fucking dish out some hats or something for coming and hang out. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So I think the live aspect is something that could come around the fantasy aspect as well. I want to talk really quick about your home league. And you dove into a little bit. Obviously, it's kind of a family lineage project. 25 years. Obviously, you haven't been around, the whole time as a player, but you've been involved at some level. Couple questions, just kind of rapid fire style. Is it all original members still? And is it all family members at this point?
No and no. So no, not all original members. Although there are a few original members still. And it's not just family members. No. So it's probably half family, half friends. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. We have about 11 people.
11. Okay. Do you have members all over the country, or are you all in New England?
We're all local. Yeah. We're all local in New England, right in Southern Mass.
Cool. Do you have a live draft during the season?
We do. Yep.
Love it. Live draft is probably my favorite thing of the fantasy football season. But it all depends on the group that you have, the host, where you're doing it, the enthusiasm of the league. I think that's a blast. Can you give me a couple sentences of what the live draft would be like? I've seen the inside scoop via your Instagram stories on what the team meetings are, or the league meetings are every week, which are very entertaining. I love watching those. What's the live draft with? Who hosts it? Like, where's it at? Talk me through that real quick.
Yeah, we usually host it at my parents' house. They just have the bigger space. I think actually maybe this year we'll host it at my house. It's a lot like what you'd see on the Instagram post. So, all right. So if you're listening and you want to go check out our Instagram handle, it's at the Commish FFP, where we save videos. I posted maybe like 5 or 6 weekly meetings, and so you can kind of check those out. But yeah, no, man, it's just a shit show. It's like, if someone usually around round 5 or 6, you'll get that guy who drafts someone who's hurt, and like that's when it'll blow up. I mean, the shit show just doesn't stop after that. You usually get guys who draft an extra wide receiver, and whatever the case is, it's like it's just an absolute tirade of. You could even draft like the best person at that time, and they'll shit on you for it. So it's just an onslaught of just verbal abuse for a whole 3 hours. It's great.
My favorite is like drafting. I don't know. I'll take like a mid rounder. I don't know. Stephon Diggs, like somebody
Yeah.
calling him out in like the 6th round because they didn't cross him off his list or some shit.
Yeah.
And everyone just kind of goes quiet, looking like you got like 5 seconds to figure it out.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's the
Man.
fucking worst. And then you're just like, bro, he's not available. And they're like,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, because you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I want you to just kind of, again, we talked about this. I don't know what episode it was, but it was a while back. We were talking about league settings on the TCK pod when we brought you on. Can you just rehash again, you have some unique settings with your home league. And you and I talked quite a bit about different league settings with Lucas's and things. What do you have in your home league that might be unique to what you guys do, and what have you done over the years?
Yeah. So a few unique things that we do, particularly with the quarterback spot. So we play a two quarterback league to start. Okay. So
So to be clear, is that super flex or just
yes,
straight two QBs?
yes, no. So it's super flex. So basically, yes. So it's a super flex. So you have one QB spot, and then you have a super flex that adds a second QB. The reason we do that is because of the point structure for quarterbacks in our league. We in our point structure, we have a half point per completion for throwing.
Love it.
And the reason we do that is because we want to mirror the point structure as close to what people care about in the NFL, also in fantasy football, right? So you always see the stat line 19 for, what was it? Jimmy G was 19 for 21 going into the fourth quarter, right? Into the Super Bowl. So
we don't talk about the Super Bowl here on the podcast, but thanks so much for bringing it up.
Yeah, I figured I'd drop that one in there. So that was a stat line that people cared about, and clearly Kyle Shanahan decided to make some decisions off of that stat line, 19 for 21, and they continued to have him throw the ball. The point being is that stat line matters. And so if you add a half point per completion on every completion that a quarterback makes, all of a sudden the quarterback becomes much more valuable.
100%.
And it changes the draft structure that we have every year. So for example, like this year, Patrick Mahomes went first, even before Saquon or Christian McCaffrey in our league. And I posted it, and people were shitting on our draft board because they look at that and they're like, how the hell did Patrick Mahomes go number 1 overall? Well, he was the best player in fantasy football the season before that. So in our league, he is the best player, and to not pick him first is just insane, right? So, and again, it's because of the point structure. It makes things a lot more fun. But what it also does, and this is why we have to have the super flex, is that if you have a quarterback that has a pretty rough day, man, you need your other quarterback to help you out, because otherwise you'll fall behind too quickly, too fast, and you'll never catch up.
Yep.
So that's one aspect of the point structure that's quite interesting. The other point structure that's fairly interesting is, or I would say more the roster position, is that we also play defensive players. So we don't just play, the standard league system. We also add defensive players. And so, for example, I made a late pickup in Budda Baker from the Arizona Cardinals. Most people wouldn't even know, if you're from Arizona, obviously you know who Budda Baker is, but most people wouldn't know who Budda Baker is. He's a free safety over in Arizona. The guy's a stud. He's an absolute monster in the backfield for that team. And it actually makes watching both sides of the ball quite interesting when you're watching fantasy, right? And defensive players can make a huge difference if you get the point structure set up such that they can score a lot of points for you. So there are weeks where you have defensive players scoring as many points as good running backs in any given week. So, so that element also gives you, it keeps you sharp on both sides of the ball. And so we also have that in our home league, which is quite interesting.
That's awesome. And what is your favorite style? Obviously you've been doing that. We talked about it as well last time we spoke about this on the podcast, that my league of record used to do that as well for years. And we finally got rid of it because it was just, I mean, basically if your quarterback doesn't score 60 points, you're fucked. And and we were only doing single quarterback because it wasn't really a 2 QB thing to do yet in fantasy, so we just never got there. But I always share the story when it comes up. I happen to have Mike Vick for the Eagles in the Monday night game that he played the Redskins, and he ran for 2 and threw for 2. But we also have bonus scoring. So any 40, 50-yard touchdowns, an extra 5 points on top of blah, 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 whatever. In that game, Mike Vick alone scored 94 points. Later in that same season, I had Tom Brady. I don't remember what year this was, 2011 or something maybe. I had Tom Brady, and then my backup quarterback was Flynn. For the Packers, who was backing up Aaron Rodgers, of course. Well, Rodgers didn't play week 17. Matt Flynn comes in and plays. I had him on the bench, of course, but he throws for 6 touchdowns. He had 107 points by himself.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was a quarterback. And I think that was the point where, like, Eli Manning was putting up, like, 60, 70 a week, too. We're like,
that's a lot.
This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. We were doing full point. We were doing full point per completion. But nonetheless, it was fun. We also used to do 2 defenses. We've considered taking care of kicking out kickers, kicking out tight ends, doing, like, 4 running backs and 5 receivers, or just do, like, 5 flexes and no set positions. There's all sorts of things you can do. What is your favorite style of football? Redraft, keeper, dynasty, IDP. What if you can set the settings yourself? What would you pick?
Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, I think I like our home league draft system. I like the defensive player situation we have. I like the flex spot with the QB system, the super flex rather. So that's the word I was looking for. Super flex with the double QBs. I like the half point per completion for quarterbacks. It's obviously a full PPR. We have tight ends. It is a full redraft, so we don't play keeper. I've only done a keeper league once before. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I get it. I understand them.
I'm all about it.
You like them, huh? Yeah.
But I'm not super dynasty though, and I think that's an interesting conversation of being a keeper player but not dynasty, and that's a whole other can of worms. But go ahead. I personally like keeper, not super into dynasty.
So I'm actually happy you brought up the dynasty piece, because I am very unfamiliar with dynasty. I'm just now starting to understand the point of dynasty and how it changes up the way you look at everything, like it just everything in general, which is like, just the way you draft players, and you have to pay attention to college too. Like that's a whole realm that I haven't even touched yet. And again, we're from New England, so college football and just college sports, maybe even outside of like maybe college hockey, is kind of it's a bit of irrelevant into some cases. So we're over here just trying to do our best understanding the NFL structure. To throw in college to understand that on a dynasty situation would be it would be a lot. So so for now we're flirting with the idea of doing a dynasty situation in 2020.
Awesome.
Haven't gotten there yet, but maybe it's going to happen.
Cool. Maybe we'll have to jump into one together to kind of, totally. get into it. But the difference for me is keeper is basically maybe 3-5 tops, but not your entire roster. And right. what I like about keepers is that it really just puts legitimacy to your draft and next year. So our league of record is it's been a keeper league. We're like 12 years in or whatever. We're still at 1 keeper. I've been trying to get to 2-3 keepers for years, but we have a league vote. It gets voted down. So be it. Prime example though. I drafted Alvin Kamara as a rookie in the 10th round behind Mark Ingram, behind Adrian Peterson. Actually I drafted AP in like the 8th, and I was like, well, if he gets hurt, might as well have this kid to come up. Maybe he'll be valuable. Of course, he became Alvin Kamara. The rest is history. I kept Kamara as the 10th round pick the next year. And then I had like AB and Joe Mixon and AJ, some ridiculous roster, and I went undefeated and won the league. So, and the guy that won the league this year kept George Kittle in the 10th round from 2 years ago draft, right? So it sounds crazy today because of what George Kittle did, but again, it's just the whole year things can change. I like that a lot.
Yep.
So I'm all about the keeper leagues personally.
Cool.
You're the commissioner in almost all your leagues, if you know whatever. I am too. Commish tips. I know that you kind of want to. We've talked about kind of you want to run a series to talk to commissioners of leagues and how everybody does things differently. I would love to be a part of that for sure. But just quick, a couple things like how do you handle money collection, rule decisions? Are you a democracy or are like you the boss? Setting changes, group votes, whatever.
Yeah. So, man, my league's the inmates run the prison over there. So, so the home league, man, it's tricky. Yeah. So it's democracy, right? It's democracy votes. Basically, yeah, it's just majority wins. We just take votes as they come, and that's what sticks, regardless of how much people bitch and complain. And you can literally, go back to listen to the few of the episodes we've had. I think one of them's called "Shut the Fuck Up, Jake." That is a very very clear breakdown of how my league likes to settle problems. There's nothing healthy about it. There's nothing healthy about the way that they try to handle problems. And so I'm in the middle of all that bullshit.
Sure.
It's interesting. So a good tip is if you can handle the democracy situation well, I would recommend that. That's a good way to do it.
It takes respect though in your group.
It does, man. Yeah, but at the same time, as a commissioner, you kind of have to earn it, right? You also have to have respect for people in your league and hear people out, and then just probably manage that process as best as you possibly can. One of the things I would say is give people the room to vent. If they want to vent, give them the room, and then understand that that they're not always going to be right, and they have to understand that. It's a bit of a give and take. Money collection. So yeah, we're a bit different, right? So I know some leagues it's just kind of like a $20 buy-in, and everyone just kind of pays maybe through Venmo or something earlier in the season, and then however the league distributes it is how they distribute it. So we obviously do things differently. So we have our money's we have a couple of tiers with our money. So I'll kind of break this down as best I can here. So we have $150 buy-in, and that money is only for first, second, and third place winners. So I think it's like $1,050 for first place, $450 for second place, $150 for third place, and that's all from the buy-in money. Then I mentioned earlier in the episode tonight that we have weekly meetings. That weekly meeting is meant for free agent pickups. So for example, Sky, if you and I's quarterback went down, say Drew Brees and I don't know, Mitch Trubisky got benched, okay? Earlier in the season, Drew Brees got hurt, okay? You and I both needed quarterbacks, and let's just say who was good like in the beginning of the season? Like Andy Dalton was decent, I think. Like he was throwing bombs.
Andy Dalton and Nick Mullins are on the waiver wire.
Yeah, let's just say that's the case, right? And say that they're blowing up, right? Say they're having a Fitzmagic kind of situation where they're just blowing up, right? You and I now are going to start bidding on that player, right? So you would start with $5 and I'd say 10 and you say 15, and it'd go all the way up until one of us drops out. And we, on any given week, I think we averaged this year $250 a week. So people were spending upwards of $100, $200. Drew Brees, when he came back, went for a record $501 this year. Insane.
That's real money, people.
Real cash, like real cash. I know it's bananas, but it's real. So it happened. It absolutely blew out the last record before that. So now how do we handle that money collection? So you're not able to pick up another player the next week until your dues are paid up the next week. So that $501 bill that Ryan ended up having in our league, he wasn't able to change anyone in his roster. He couldn't pick anybody up or drop anybody. He had to stick with his roster until he paid his $501 bill. So that's how we've been able to handle it, and it's worked really well. And it's been the best strategy. And you can't cash out. There's nothing that you can do until you pay that bill. Now I'll add this last piece. And this is what kind of makes this is what also makes the league fun, because this is what helps for last place compete with first place only, because we are not a head-to-head league. We are full points, right? So we have full first place. Yep, first place down to last place, no head-to-head. So it's you are literally one against the field. Okay. We do a situation where we have $5 a week. and that money in the pot, $5 per week, which is about $55 a week, goes to the winner who wins that week. So even if you're in last place or in 10th place or in 9th place and you haven't hit that 8th spot for the playoffs, you can still win money by carving out a few good weeks. Like you can still rack up like $150 if you win a couple of weeks or 3 weeks in the league, even if you're out of it because you had a pretty terrible maybe first half of the season. So there are ways to make money in our league that are separate from racking up a $501 bill.
For Drew. That is cool. That's cool. And I think that a really tough thing about fantasy is when you are not in head-to-heads, you're in those point systems. I think a tough thing is figuring out how those bottom tier teams don't give up, quit, whatever. I mean, $150, like depending on what you do for a living and whatever, could be a shit ton of money. Might not be much money at all. Who gives a shit? It's not the money. It's the principle of not bailing on the league and sticking around with the crew and stuff. So I think that's interesting to come up with fun ways to keep everybody involved and winning. Shit, if I win 3 weeks and I still am in last place, I got my money back, or I'm still involved. I also hear all these things too about you play like half the season. The first half of the season, you take like the top 4 teams or whatever, they make the playoffs automatically. The second half of the season, you take another 4 teams, they make the playoffs. If they're any of the same teams, then you go down the list, kind of a thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that way, if say you have you're 6-0, and you're crushing it, and then 3 of your top dudes get hurt because it's fantasy football, and you shit the bed the rest of the week or rest of the season, you don't get penalized super harsh. You still make the playoffs because you were there in the first half. Now you got to deal with it once you get to the playoffs, but at least you get to be in there.
Yeah.
Speaking of the playoffs, man, we've talked a lot. We're over an hour already. I want to get into some fun stuff, and we'll get out of here.
Cool.
Let's talk about the Patriots. I'm not going to talk. Sure. I'm not going to talk about the Niners. So you live in New England, obviously. You're a Patriots fan, I would assume.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Lifelonger.
Yeah. Whole life. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yep.
How has it been living in New England over the last 20 years or so, as the Patriots have maintained one of the most impressive dynasties in sports history? And what is your favorite Patriots moment, if you have one?
I mean, dude, it's the funny part is it's like the Patriots are wrapped in to the other 4 sports because every sport in Boston has had a multitude of success. Like it's like exponential success. It's I don't even know. Like I'm almost like
I'm kind of the same in the Bay Area too.
Yeah, like what?
It's been interesting.
Yeah, like how do you? I don't know how to explain this to my kids when I'm like, that's the only way I can compare it. It's like you have no idea how good it was. Like it was beyond good. Like it was just the greatest time to have in any era of sports ever. I think. I mean, I can't think of another way to like another dynasty type of scenario where you have what is it like 11 championships or something between in 20 years by 4 different sports or something. It's just like so no, I was 10 or 11 when Tom Brady went to his first Super Bowl. I'm 30 and he's still playing. This is like
and playing well.
Yeah, it's like what do we? I don't even know how to put it into words. Like there's no words for it. It's just we're watching something that's never been done and will never happen ever again. And so it's funny when people complain about it, and I get it. Like you want to see other teams in there, but we're never going to see this ever again. I mean, maybe Patrick Mahomes, but who knows, man? Because everyone thought that about a whole bunch of players, lots of players, and it just never pans out the way you think it's gonna. And the fact that the fortune has been as good as it has for Bill, I mean, he even said it in his press conference when they lost the game. He's like, one of the reporters said something to the effect of like, the ups and downs or something. And he's like, yeah, well, there haven't been a lot of downs. So what are you talking about? He basically, it's like, and he's right though. Like I know he's Bill being Bill, but he's right. And no, it's, very grateful. I think it's been awesome. Yeah, it's been awesome. So
that's great. I've got a similar case across the country. I mean, the Niners, of course, have been pretty rough until this year. But growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, the Niners were the team to beat with the Cowboys and whatnot. And then on the baseball side, the Giants, winning 3 championships in 5 years. And then on the hoop side, the fucking Warrior dynasty, man. And then you know, I mean, like the hockey, like the Sharks haven't been scrubs for a long time too, you know. So it's been quite a blessing over here too. I'm curious to get your inside scoop on that, because I watch it from as far away as you can be, and I'm like, holy shit, how cool would that be?
Yeah, well, let me actually I'll give you a quick little story that'll give you some insight to maybe people that are like, let's say in their 50s or 60s in New England, okay? And I'll tell you, this will make a lot of sense, okay? And this will put everything into context. So I know everyone likes to complain about the Patriots and how good they've been, but let me put into context how bad they used to be, okay? Yep. So we have two guys in my home league that are, you ready for this? They're Red Sox fans, they're Bruins fans, they're Celtics fans, and they're New York Giant fans.
Rough.
Like, weird, just a weird combination. They're three Boston sports, and then the New York Giants. It's like, where the fuck did that come from? Like, why? How are you guys Giants fans? Well, this is the story. The story is that they're Giants fans from their dads. Mm. Their dads grew up watching the Giants because the Pats used to suck so bad that they wouldn't air them on television locally in New England. They would only air the Giants. And so their dads grew up watching the Giants because the Giants were the team back then, and the Patriots never got aired. And that was just the deal. And so they grew up being Giants fans. And so, you know, there's a whole bunch of Giants fans in New England just because they never aired the Patriots. That's how shitty they were. So, wow. You know, so just for some context, man, it hasn't always been roses for people that are listening. It's been, we've had our ups and downs. So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And likewise, you know, people in that same era of Niner fans were kind of the cream of the crop, but they were also really bad for stints too. So that's impressive. Yep. Did you by chance, have you seen the E60 of Drew Bledsoe by chance?
I haven't yet. No, okay. No, I want to see it. Yeah.
So definitely watch it. It's super cool. I think just as a New England, as a Patriot guy, you'll love it. Sure. I mean, me just as a sports fan, I thought it was great. Anyway, yep. You know, the younger people, I guess, listening who know that Drew Bledsoe got hurt and Tom Brady took over and the rest is history, don't necessarily know who Drew Bledsoe was before he got hurt. He was not some just fucking old scrub taking time up until Brady was going to get his chance. This was not like a Rodgers Favre thing at all. Brady was a fucking nobody scrub who just happened to get a chance. And yep. Bledsoe had literally set the record with the deal for the Patriots for the highest paid quarterback in NFL history the year before that. A couple games in the season, he gets hurt. The rest is history. It is what it is. Faded out with the Bills. He was okay, but just wasn't his. My question to you, Chris, being local and seeing that firsthand, I kind of saw my only relation, I guess, would be the like end of Joe Montana when he went to the Chiefs. Like, oh God, I can't even think about that. But then Steve Young got his chance. You know what I mean? And it was just a kind of an interesting changeover. Do you remember how good Drew Bledsoe actually was in New England? And do you think that the Patriots would have done anything close to what they have done if if Tom didn't get that opportunity, remembering that in 1996, Bledsoe got him all the way to the Super Bowl, where Favre and the Packers beat him. But really, going into that game, I believe the Patriots were the favorite, actually, with Drew Bledsoe. So, just curious, as a legit Patriots fan, do you think that Drew would have been able to do similar things with, Bill Belichick was obviously already there and things like that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Brady's in a world of his own, man. Like I don't think so. I do remember though how good he was. I remember watching that Super Bowl against the Packers. I remember being upset and crying. I was like 7 when they lost. Like I was very upset when that happened. I was super young. And I remember when the Pats won, and I remember the controversy when Drew Brees came into the AFC Championship game because Tom got hurt and threw a touchdown. And he looked like his old self. So the controversy building up, I still remember, like 10 years old, 11 years old, was, is Drew Bledsoe going to play in the Super Bowl, or will it be Tom Brady? And Bill stuck with Tom Brady, and that was it.
It was a decision, one of the most just sports changing decisions ever. Any sport, for Bill Belichick to roll with Brady over Bledsoe with everything that was going on. It's a great series, man. Check it out. You'll love that.
Do they talk about that in the series in the E60?
Oh, dude.
Documentary?
Yeah. The whole thing is basically Drew Bledsoe now is obviously well retired,
Sure.
and he's a wine connoisseur at this point, and he sits down with Jeremy Schaap, and it's a great interview. But they flash back to basically that in Drew Bledsoe's career coming up at Washington State up the road from me. He was the number one dude by far. I mean, by far. Drew Bledsoe was, who we think Mahomes is. I don't know. At the time, it sounds ridiculous, but that's the reality.
Dude, he's in Jerry Maguire. Like you got Tom Cruise hanging behind him. Remember that scene? Like
exactly.
Right
exactly. But he got hurt, and frankly, that injury almost killed him. And it took him a long time to come back. When he got a chance, Bill stayed with Brady a couple times, and it really damaged Drew Bledsoe as a player and his psyche and everything else. Not that Tom's injured and fading out, but eventually he'll be like 60 and he'll have to retire or move on. What's next for the Patriots, in your opinion, whether Tom leaves this year to any of these myriad of teams that we've talked about, or if he even sticks around next couple of years, whatever, in the next 3 to 5 years, what's next for the Patriots? Full rebuild, or do you think you'll be able to maintain with whoever's next?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing Bill's been able to do well is just maintain. And it's you probably heard this 100 times. It's the next man up mentality. I don't think he goes away from that as long as he's the coach, and so I think that continues. Something tells me Brady's coming back for at least one more year. I think maybe two. I don't know, man. I don't know. I sit here and I speculate, and then he'll probably end up leaving because he's got other opportunities if he wants, but I don't see why he would want to have to rebuild somewhere else and do that with the limited amount of time over money. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. So if he wants to leave, it ain't going to be because of money. I don't know. I'm not, I don't know. I don't know. I don't proclaim to know Tom Brady. So I have no idea, but really I don't see that happening. They need to get another quarterback, though. I actually think they need to draft another quarterback because Jarrett Stidham's good, but they need some battle. They need some QB battling right now. Like I think they only had 2 QBs, and they've only rolled with mostly 2 QBs, other than when they had Jimmy G and Jacoby Brissett at the same time. I don't think just Bill. I think kind of utilized them as chips. Not Jimmy G, but Jacoby Brissett. And so they need to get another QB. They have to figure out that offensive line situation, and you and Lucas have already talked about it, but their receiving core, man, just needs some love. Need some love. I don't even know where to start. It's pathetically embarrassing. So
it's almost like Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon would have helped.
You think?
Yikes. Well, I got a lightning round here for you. 10 questions coming up, but before that, just some personal shit. Just because I'm all about it, I made some trips in my past. You just got back from a trip from Universal Studios and Disney World, I believe. Unfortunately, the Patriots nor the 49ers made that trip this year, which is very sad. Maybe next year. Quick question for you. Who's your favorite Disney character and why? And which NFL player would you compare them to?
I mean, all right. So I thought about this question because you did send me the list, so I did see this ahead of time. My gut feeling is like Mickey. Like I just love Mickey, and like Mickey's my Tom Brady. Like of course
he's classic, dude. He's
classic. Like you should see this guy like doing Fantasmic. He's got fucking laser beams coming out of his fingers, and he's just out there doing his job, like putting old bad guys away. It's great.
He's the face of the franchise. Yeah, storied legend.
He's got a whole cast of characters that are just not doing it for him. Like I'm not sure about this daffy guy, this goofy guy. Sure. I don't think he's got a good collection of cast around him.
Sure, and even if you go back to Mickey Mouse's early draft resume, of course he was Steamboat Willie in the 40s. For those of you keeping score, who you may not know, which is. I happened to accidentally be a Michigan fan when Tom Brady was there randomly. So I do remember him being there, but you may not remember what he was doing much because, again, he was 6th-round draft pick, all this other shit. But I think Mickey's classic. I went with Donald Duck. I'm a little biased because, of course, I live in Eugene and literally like the Ducks. Donald Duck is the Duck.
Yep.
So I appreciate that. And I think he's kind of I want to think of like a Gronkowski, but not as like buff, just kind of a goofy, fun kind of spaz dude. Like the Duck mascot is one of the best in the country and wins like awards every year and shit for being the boss. And so I love that. But I'm glad I'm glad you got a trip.
Yeah, it was good. I was gonna say I kind of see Donald Duck being more like a Marshawn Lynch type. Can't really understand what he's saying, but it's important. I think that's
I love it. Cool, man. Well, blessings to you and the missus, man. I know that was a good trip for you. I'm glad you got some time.
Appreciate it.
Yo,
Thanks.
lightning round, and we'll get out of here, bro. I got 10 questions. I'm going to go quick. Answer as quickly as you can. Let's blaze through this. Question number 1. Who is your favorite all-time Patriots player not named Tom Brady?
Troy Brown.
Love it. Who is your favorite all-time non-Patriot player and why?
Terrell Davis. I just remember the late '90s, early 2000s, and I remember that Broncos team, and he was a beast. I loved him.
Mile high salute, baby, all day.
Yep.
Love TD. Yep. Who is your favorite player all time for fantasy football and why?
Le'Veon Bell. I know you love him.
Le'Veon Bell. He was going to be my answer to another question on this list, but maybe a different one. Who was one player you drafted in 2019 with high expectations and let you down?
Joe Mixon, I think, was someone who let me down real early, and I got rid of him. We broke up midway through the season. Yeah, Joe Mixon.
And he persevered late, too.
I know. Oh my God,
makes it worse. Salt in the wound.
I know. Yep, sure was. I was like, man. Yep.
Number 5, who is one waiver wire pickup from 2019 that carried you to a championship or close to it?
Waiver wire. Oh, man. I mean, in the home league, so again, we played defensive players, and I already mentioned Budda Baker, but I think, man, he was phenomenal. I mean, if anybody who's an Arizona Cardinals fan listen to this, either watching this or listening to this episode, man, Budda Baker's a freaking animal. He did like a backflip with his pads on once. I was like, holy shit. He's insane. That guy's incredible. Dude, in the TCK league, I don't know that we really picked anybody up that would swing the pendulum. I don't know. Maybe I'll throw the question back to you. It's like I can't really think of anybody. I think we didn't really pick up anybody that was heavy in terms of adding points to what we were doing. So we did a lot of our maneuvers through trades. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way. I mean, I think a lot of those later round guys, Brashad Perryman was a huge one. Ryan Tannehill coming off the bench. I know Lucas grabbed him in the TCK Pod League, helped him ride to the championship. Some of those guys for sure. Yeah. I think, some of those tight ends too. I mean, you had like Jacob Hollister randomly. Waller was a waiver wire guy. So a lot of those guys, which is interesting. Well, number 6, who are 2 players at each position you'll be targeting in drafts, regardless of ADP? Basically, what I wanted to hear was, each position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, who are 2 players that, regardless of ADP, like Lamar Jackson, Mahomes in like the second round, if that's what you got to do, you're going to do it, or late round guys, 2 at each position. Who are you looking to hope to draft every draft this season?
So a guy that I drafted in my home league that didn't quite pan out because of injury, but I just think he's a monster if he can get it together for a whole season, is Evan Ingram as a tight end. If you're in a tight end league, that plays a tight end, I think there's only like 3 or 4 of them that are going to do it for you. And I was really pulling for him. I love watching him play too. He's a great player to watch. Like, he's fun. He's kind of like a receiver, not a tight end. But just is a beast when he plays well. So I'm gonna go for Evan Ingram again. I think he's gonna slide down in his ADP. That'll help. But regardless, I think I'm gonna try to go for him again. Another player. Another person I drafted, Saquon Barkley, another guy who I feel like I kind of got ripped off a little bit. It's like I drafted him first overall from my spot, second overall in the whole draft, and he got hurt and didn't bounce back until the end of the season. So I didn't get to enjoy him the way everyone got to enjoy him the season before, and I want to. It's like I really want to enjoy me some Saquon. So I'm gonna try to, if I'm there again in the beginning of that draft, I want Saquon.
How about a quarterback and receiver?
Yeah, QB. Patrick Mahomes. I mean, if I get a chance, he's only been around for 2 years, but if I get a chance to get him, Patrick Mahomes. Dude, you know who I think I enjoy watching him play, and I feel like I got gypped with Stefan Diggs. I love watching Stefan Diggs play. I just like the way he runs his routes, like his touch on the ball, and when he fires, when his gears are firing, he can take over a football game. And he started off super slow for me this season too. So, yeah, I'd like to get some Stefan Diggs.
Awesome. We asked for 2, so I'll just round it out with my picks, I guess, real quick. So quarterback, I'm going to go with Dak Prescott everywhere that I possibly can. Running back, Joe Mixon for sure. Receiver, I think AJ Green even maybe too, but to bounce off another team. I know a lot of people are scared a little bit, but I feel a bounce back from both Odell Beckham and Juju. So I think both those guys I'll be looking at. And then tight end, my man Mark Andrews bounced back again. Just because I don't think I'm going to go with Kittle, who I love, but I don't think I'm going to go that early. So I'll probably go with Mark Andrews. And if he lands in a proper spot, I think David Njoku and OJ Howard are going to be forgotten about completely. And I think both those guys could crush.
Yep. Cool, man. Good stuff.
All right. Number 7, who is one player you'll be avoiding? I said at each position, but for sake of time, why don't you just give me one player this year that you're going to be avoiding regardless of cost?
Oh man, Jesus, so many players. I was probably underwhelmed with Le'Veon Bell. I'm sold. I don't think that system works for him.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Number 8, if you could do a post-game jersey swap with anyone currently in the NFL, who would it be?
Julio.
But dude, honestly, I think that's my answer too.
Yeah.
And if not, I'm probably going to go with Alvin Kamara.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I could rock some like gold teeth, grab an Airhead, swap jerseys. I think that'd be super dope. Number 9, which team in each conference is most likely to go worst to first in their division for 2020? So I've got the AFC, I've got the NFC. So we'll break this down real quick. The last place teams in each division for the AFC were the Dolphins, the Bungles, the Jags, and the Chargers. Which of those 4 teams has the best opportunity to go worst to first? Dolphins, Bungles, Jags, Chargers.
Probably. Oh, Jesus. It depends on who the Chargers get for a quarterback. I'd probably say the Chargers. Probably the Chargers. Yeah. Chargers.
Okay. And, of course, that means that they're going to beat out the Chiefs because this is worst to first. Beat out the Chiefs, who just won the Super Bowl, the Raiders, and the Broncos. NFC, Redskins, Lions, Panthers, Cardinals.
Redskins, Lions, Panthers, Cardinals. The Lions.
Lions. I like it. Good bounce back. Yep. I think I would change that up. I think I would actually go with the Bungles, believe it or not. And I think that the Cardinals actually have an opportunity if they can get it together. But I think that NFC West is going to be nasty. Last question before I turn the mic over to you, my man. Which 2 teams play in Super Bowl 55 and who wins it?
I missed the beginning of that. Can you say it one more time?
Which 2 teams play in Super Bowl 55 and who wins it?
Yeah. Okay.
I'll get you. I want to get you on record in February. You know what I'm saying?
I know. Yeah. Exactly.
A year early.
When no one has landed in any position.
Exactly. And I will definitely be holding you to this.
Fair enough. Okay. So, Jesus. All right, I'm gonna go with the dark horse here. I like Tennessee. I'm gonna go Tennessee, and
that's assuming they keep Tannehill and Henry, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So Tennessee, and I'm gonna say Seattle, and I think Tennessee wins.
Damn, love it, man. Yep. Love it. Bold pick. I like it. Yo. Last question, man. I really, really, really appreciate your time. Chris, thank you so much for what you've contributed to this episode. I mean, again, we're an hour and a half in. I love doing these long chats. It's way late on your side. I appreciate you rocking with us. And thank you so much for doing what you do with the Commish FFP. You guys are doing some innovative things. You're doing some great things with the merchandise, the family vibes. You got a cool league there with some interesting rules. So I, applaud you guys for what you're doing. I appreciate what you have contributed to the TCK pod. Of course, we're going to reconnect multiple times this year on both episodes. I know it'll be fun. Before we get out of here, let people know how you and I got in contact. I think it's kind of a cool organic connection. And then I've got one final question for you.
All right, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was really interesting when I was thinking of starting a podcast. I was like, well, I probably should start listening to some fantasy football podcasts to see what the content is like. And so I started just searching for fantasy football podcasts. And so yours wasn't one of the first ones that came up, but I had listened to like 3 or 4 of them, and I was very unimpressed. Again, like going back to like, I know good quality when I hear it. And then, dude, I stumbled upon that giant orange square, and I was like, let me click on this guy. And so I did. I clicked on it, and I was like, what the hell does TCK stand for? And then I tried to say TCK, and I got tongue-tied a few times. And then, I realized it was the Candlestick Kids. So then I started listening, dude, and the content was great. And I listened to the first episode. It was fucking money. And then I listened to the next episode, and that was money. And I was like, okay, this guy's got something good here. Like, he's doing some good shit. And then I listened to a bunch of the older episodes about, your breakdowns on tight ends. I actually listened to the BDGE one. And
cool.
I thought that was awesome, because then I heard the whole content bit about Gary Vee, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, these guys are right up
Gary
my alley.
Vee just making connections. That's what's up.
Yeah, it's wild, dude. Yeah, it's wild when you find people that just like the same shit that you like, and all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I can dig what this guy's putting out there. And then you started talking about how you had a listener league. So I'm like, what, and again, taking the page out of the Gary Vee playbook, he talks all the time about collabs. He talks about that with rappers, but the principle's still the same. It's like, do more collaborations, get more stuff out there, get more content, push content. So I'm like, why don't I just try to, as the commish, me, Alex, and Eric can go in the TCK Pod League, smash, walk out as champions, and we'll boost our credibility that way, And so
it's that easy. Just do it. Yeah.
Course,
what's up?
Yeah, exactly. It's just that easy. So that was the plan. And we got close, but we didn't obviously succeed. And Lucas fucking came in and destroyed us. And but I digress. So, and then you started talking about how you welcomed on people to contribute. So I was like, you know what? This is, and when I talk about the action versus inaction at, somewhere in the middle of that episode that we just had, I'm serious about this. Like, I try to practice what I preach. I heard you say it, and I did it. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to this guy and tell him, like, dude, we have a podcast. This is what we do. We're looking to collab. And then I DM'd you, and before you knew it, we were in contact, and that's it. We just started, texting and figuring out when to have an episode. And the first episode we did, actually, Alex was with me, and we kind of did it as a three-way episode. And dude, even just like at the end of the episode, when it wrapped up, you just gave us some good feedback, some good advice on, things to consider when we were kind of just first starting up with our mics and shit, like just giving us mic help. I was like, that's awesome. Thank you. And I just knew right then and there, like, it was going to be a good opportunity to build something cool. So, so dude, thank you for being there all the way through this process. And, we're about to start up a 2020 journey, and, I'm happy to be a part of your journey, and vice versa, man. It's going to be great.
Yeah, man. Respect. Well, again, I appreciate the collabs too. And, one quote that I just stumbled across actually on a walk with the missus the other day, it was spray painted on a fence along the river. And I just thought it was amazing. And it goes along with this right now. So I want to say it. The quote is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that wraps up this episode of basically you and I are doing individual things, separate things for the same goal. And we're going to go a hell of a lot farther if we go together. So I appreciate you, brother. So much love to you guys all the way across the country. Big ups to your team. And I look forward to doing more collaborations. Before we get out of here, man, please let us know every possible avenue that we can find the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast.
Yeah. So again, you can look us up on Google Play, Spotify now, which is great. We're up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast. Just go and type that in, and you'll find us. You get that big, good Commish logo. Go ahead and click on us, and you'll see all the episodes that we've done, and a lot of the episodes you and I, Sky, we've done together. So that's all there. And then on social media, we're on Twitter and Instagram at the Commish FFP. So FFP standing for Fantasy Football Podcast. So yeah, at the Commish FFP. And then soon we're going to have our own website. Again, it's going to be sort of a mixture of the apparel side and the podcast side. We don't have the link up yet, but I think for now it's going to be thecommishbrand.com. I think that's what it's going to be. But I will, the more we start building onto that, I'll have more of a solid answer for that side of it. But anyways, yep, at the Commish FFP, Instagram, Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, man. Be well, and I appreciate you.
All right, thanks, bud.
Boom.
Dude, good stuff, man.
Yes, sir. I'm going to stop
Awesome.
this here. Stop recording.